Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's uLaw webinar on timesheets and capital draw within uLaw. Today's webinar is not accredited for any CPD credits. We unfortunately did have to cancel our last week's CPD session on everything practice management, but we do have a CPD session next week, which is for 1 hour of professionalism credits. So make sure you tune in and be participating in that webinar if you wanted to get your CPD credits. Today's particular webinar is something that we had delivered, I would say, early mid-May, and it's available on our YouTube channel. But of course, we, as part of our webinar series, make it a habit to start to highlight the most important components and aspects of the uLaw product that we believe everyone should be using. And again, this is once again a reiteration of that. So we're specifically going to focus on two key functionalities within the uLaw product around the timesheets, as well as how the time is reflected in terms of revenue generated, as well as the amount of revenue that you as an individual make for yourself. And using capital draw as an example, how you can make that money into your own account. Okay. At any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat window. And I will do my best to make this as informative as possible. Like every other uLaw webinar, today's webinar has a specific agenda, and I'll try and run through this real quick so that we could focus more on the actual demonstration of this rather than just spend on the timesheet slides. So we're going to focus mostly on how best you can utilize, first and foremost, understand the need for this, and then furthermore, utilize the functionality of the timesheets within the uLaw product. Okay? We're going to talk about if you are a multi-legal professional law firm, how do you best assess, analyze, document the contribution of time and effort across all these different colleagues that participate in that law firm. If it's a solo practitioner, of course, then it's a much simpler value proposition. It's just you figuring out how much of time you've spent in delivering in a month, in a particular time period. As a solo practitioner, maybe you're more focused on where has my time gone? Which client has absorbed a lot of my time? What's the revenue that I have generated? How much of revenue have I generated from each of these different clients? And those may be the type of analytics that's more interesting to you if you're a sole practitioner. Okay, so we most definitely deliver both these different flavors in terms of timesheets and for you to appreciate time, effort, revenue, and drawing. Capital investment and draw, we of course talk about if you're a sole practitioner, if you're set up for draws. If you're set up for payroll, if you're set up for those types of, we're not going to be covering it today. We have a separate webinar in September where we're going to exclusively talk about how you manage payroll within uLaw. Today I'm talking about more of a solo practitioner. Maybe you're set up for drawing. You're not incorporated, no salaries probably. The simple, fast way for you to reflect and represent how you're making money from the business to your own account. Okay. And of course, if it's a multi-legal law firm, one of the most important prerequisites that I think you should appreciate that's important for you to consider, keep in mind, and know how to maneuver with is the concept of co-workers and rates. And we'll definitely cover that as part of our webinar today. Okay? So really in terms of slide share, that's pretty much all I had, I believe. Because the amount of time that I actually need to run through this webinar through a demo is probably going to be much longer than my other demonstrations. For those who have joined us for the first time, welcome. And we are a Canadian company. We've been in business over 10 years, delivering quality cloud-based legal accounting, practice management, and business accounting software. for legal professionals across the country. We welcome you to visit our new website, uLaw.io. Provide us your feedback, and we do offer a no obligation 30-day free trial sign up where we walk you through the product and have you a little bit of a taste for the overall product experience. Okay? As you probably noticed, one of our more recent security aspects that we've added, I'm just logging into my Fixtures Legal Professional account called Roger Moore, and you can clearly notice that we've got the ability for you to either email your code or you can even text your code. I'm going to quickly jump into my account. And we're going to first start with a solo practitioner's experience of utilizing these features within uLaw, and then I'm going to move forward with a multi-law firm setting, maybe a couple of co-workers all engaged either in the same matter or different matters. We'll figure it out with time. Once again, use the chat window to ask any specific questions that you may have. Please do mute your phone lines. This entire session is being recorded and most certainly will be available to you early next week on our YouTube channel. I'm going to quickly text myself. All right. And this is an easy, fast way for you to get your 4-digit code as well. And there you go. I'm logged into my Fixtures uLaw account as a legal professional, Roger Moore. Okay. Now, as you can see, within the uLaw product, we have this concept of contacts. So let me just draw your attention to this important menu option. Under contacts, and maybe this is overlooked, but we do have a group called coworkers. Okay? And you can see there's quite a few coworkers here. You've got Magneto, to Hannah, to Janine, to Thomas, to Rahan. So this truly sets the prerequisite for you to add your coworkers, your colleagues, your assistants, the different roles that they may actually play, but it's important for you to add their information under co-workers if you are growing your business into a multi-law firm setup. Okay? If you're just a solo practitioner, uLaw automatically understands right under settings with all the details of you and your business and the individual that you are. So you've got your first name, last name, your profession, your address. So as a owner and a sole practitioner, we already have that information when we set that account up. It's only when you're starting to grow as a business and starting to add more colleagues is where we want you to help us by capturing that information of those individuals right under co-workers. And I'll show you why you do that. Okay, so let me first start off with a solo practitioner's experience. One of the first things that you do in uLaw, of course, is a client intake. I'm going to go ahead and say add new contact, add them to my clients. And let's say this is put a little address in. Burlington, Ontario. We'll make that as the mailing address. And let me go ahead and create that client. Now, your time does not start, or at least from a perspective of capturing time related to a file, it does not start till you've actually created the matter, and now you're starting to associate time spent against each of the time dockets that you're probably going to enter against that matter. Okay. Often the question we're getting asked is, how do I capture the time spent if it's actually a flat rate matter, right? Whether your firm is set up for a billable time, where you're pretty much going to spend 1 hour and charge 1 hour to your client, whether it's a contingency base, whether it's flat rate, uLaw allows you to capture the actual time that you've spent in that particular docket. So if let's say you have 5 different dockets within a matter, you don't necessarily charge your client for each of those dockets, but you certainly do spend the time in executing the effort or task for those different dockets. Let's say there's an initial client intake, a phone conversation, a document drafting. I'm sure you're spending the time. So we allow you to capture the time, and that gets translated into the time and effort. Whether that gets converted into a direct proportional revenue, of course, finally comes down to your business style, the way you have set up the retainer letter or the engagement letter with that client. If it's a billable rate, pretty much you spend 1 hour, you charge 1 hour, then it's directly proportional. Sometimes you may charge 1 hour but end up spending 2 hours. Okay, so then you can appreciate that it's not a very profitable docket in itself. But let me go ahead and create a file for which I'll go ahead and click on the Matter button. For those who are users of uLaw, I'm sure you already appreciate and understand this workflow. And let me just say this is let me start with I'll start with a criminal matter and just stick to a time and material to show you that first. And then we'll move on to maybe a contingency or a flat rate matter. Okay. So this could be anything. This could be, speeding, DUI. It could be any different type of area of practice. Okay. By default, if you're not set up for a multi-law firm setup in uLaw, so if you have multiple colleagues in the firm and they're all contributing to the trust account or to your pool general account, then uLaw as a team, our support staff would help you set it up in such a way that all these different individuals are collaborating in the same files, same office setup. But if you're a sole practitioner and it's just yourself, by default the dockets already know that it's your effort that's actually going in. So when you put 1 hour, it's directly clocked against Roger Moore or whatever the individual's name is who's logged in into uLaw. I'm going to skip the whole retainer component, right? So let me just go ahead and say initial client intake. And let's say in the description, you go ahead to docket saying initial phone meeting. Set up a Zoom call to discuss next steps. Okay, so let's say that's all you've done, and you're pretty much going to charge them 30 minutes, or you could even call this initial consultation. Okay? So it's 30 minutes spent, 30 minutes charged. And the rate that we consider is based on the rate that you bring in from your settings. So right under settings, you have taxes and rates, and you could already have your default fee rate. Of course, you can override it from matter to matter. That's a flexibility we offer. We also have the default assistant rate set up as well. It's $75. Okay. You go back to the matter, and that's copied over here as well. You've got the $400 rate, the assistant rate, the first assistant, let's call it that. But I'm just going to go with a solo practitioner's perspective. Now, to answer the first question that I pretty much asked myself, which is, where do I capture the time spent? Where do I capture the time billed? This 30 minutes here, duration, is where you tell uLaw how much of time you actually spent on this docket. The billable time is the time that you bill the client. Okay? So let's go with the idea that you spent an hour, you're charging only 30 minutes worth of time. Now, you're probably not going to do this. Not every time are you going to dock it and then right away look at the timesheet, but there are certain law firms that do timesheets at the end of every day. There's a individual or a clerk or a front office admin who pretty much calculates the effort, time, and revenue generated across the firm. Just to make it easier, we've got all of that information right under the calendar because it's time-based, so you've got the timesheets right under the time. So you click on this little arrow. It's a bit of a hope, but we're hoping to make that user interface change soon so that it's readily available to you as a separate option. So very simple timesheet. Okay, let's just start with that. And I'm going to say for today, because I did the docket, I believe, for today. Of course, you could have always done a back date on these dockets. Okay. And you can clearly see the initial consultation, initial phone meeting. This is coming from a different, again, this is a test database, so you've got fancy words coming out everywhere. But you've got the initial consultation of the estimated hours and the billable hours. So you have spent the 1 hour, but are potentially charging the 30 minutes. Okay. Let me get rid of that kind of misleading. So just taking care of that. I've gotten rid of the workout at the gym. So right now I just have the initial consultation of an hour of time spent, 30 minutes, and it's automatically reflected in a timesheet. And you can continue to add that. You could say Zoom call, and signed retainer, or let's say a customer agreement. And let's call it at that. I'm going to say this time you spent an hour. May charge an hour. Okay? So as you continue to docket, and I guess you pretty much get where I'm going with this. So as you docket this particular matter with your time and effort, whether it's yourself, whether it's your front office admin, whoever does that, right? uLaw behind the scene is starting to capture that in the sense of a timesheet for capturing the time spent and where it was spent. Because that's pretty much what you want to understand at the end of any certain time period, whether that's weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, etc. So once again, going back to the action under the calendar, generating that same timesheet, like the basic timesheet for today. You now have 2 dockets. You spend an hour and a half, you billed an hour and a half. Okay? Actually, you spent 2 hours, you charge an hour and a half. Clearly tells you the time, very important. Tells you what was the task, who was the client, and we also give you the file number. That's very important. Okay, so it's not just for a specific client. We're able to tell you for the specific file this effort was put in. What was the description, time, done. Now, of course, you've not yet generated the invoice, and that's a different perspective of time and money. So right within uLaw, we have this concept of work in progress. So right under a quick view, we have this called work in progress report. And if I were to generate it for today, all these documents go hand in hand. Clearly tells you that that's the unbilled hours for today, an hour and a half. Okay, and you don't have any flat fee. It's just the unbilled hours for today. So one is a timesheet, which captures the time and the effort. The other is a document that tells you how much of time that you've actually spent you have not yet invoiced. So timesheet, work in progress. Very important two documents from the perspective of managing time and money. Because if time is money, this is the best way to keep track of where the time is going, how much money are you making. Okay? Now under that same calendar, if I go into my action, I see a bunch of other types of documents, all related to time and revenue. Okay? Now I can generate a timesheet slowly now bordering that multi-professional law firm setup. I can generate it across employees in my firm. But before doing that, I'm going to quickly generate a client summary. Again, you can do it for a time period, you can do it for a date range. It can be as fancy as you like. Once again, you can clearly see that the only client we worked on today is Mrs. Kapil Sharma. Once again, it reflects the actual time spent. So this Roger Moore has spent 2 hours, but has only charged an hour and a half. Okay? Maybe your firm does not frown upon it. Maybe your firm does. But this is a great way for you to track where the time is going. Okay. So now you've got three documents. You've got a timesheet. You've got a timesheet from a perspective of a client. And you also have a work in progress. Okay. Now let's look at another one, which says revenue by employee. And I'll say for today. And you can clearly see that it is 0. And the reason why it's 0 is because you have not yet generated that invoice and accepted a client payment. Okay, you've not yet officially made the revenue. So you've spent the time, we know how much it is, for who it was, how much of time you spent, and how much you're actually going to potentially bill even when you did it. But this report clearly tells you, but have you made the money yet? If you haven't, then you go into the work in progress document. You clearly see, where do I need to make my money? There it is, Kapil Sharma. Come in here, go into that specific file, very important. Okay. We again tell you the file number. You can use our quick view, or you can go search up that client right under matters. Go in here, generate that invoice. I'm going to skip the pre-bill just for today, but it's a great idea to actually generate pre-bills, verify that it's the right thing to do for the right amount, and generate the invoice. Okay. Now when you do generate the invoice, now you've just converted time into money, and that's your revenue. In a sole practitioner standpoint, again, depending on how you've set up your firm and all those good things, that's your money for your own firm. Okay, that's into the business. It's not into your personal pocket yet, because we'll get into that next. So here is the half hour at $400, and another 1 hour, $600 plus taxes. $678 is the amount. Now, uLaw, of course, allows you to integrate third-party payment gateways. Hopefully in the next few weeks, we will have our integration with the likes of LawPay as well. Today, we do it with Canadian companies such as Moneris, Newway, Global Payments, TD. But of course, we are planning to expand the horizon with other providers. So this is a link that you can send your client as part of that digital PDF document in an email. The client, Kapil Sharma, can open this on her phone, pretty much enter the name. I have a fancy credit card fake number, and she can actually pay for that service right from the comfort of her home. So you as a legal firm have now just improved the efficiency of your business, but also have helped towards a better user experience for your client. Okay? Now this gets sent as an email to you, and all you have to do is come in here, and I prefer using the question mark. Just make it official that you've received the payment. That's the payment reference. Deposit it into your general account. Generate a receipt for Kapil Sharma so that now you can email it back to her. Now this is one simple life cycle of a transaction that's complete. And again, of course, as you'd probably know, the documents that you generate out of uLaw are pretty much in line with the compliance aspect of your business. The documents generated are very much based on the bookkeeping guidelines of the law societies across Canada. Of course, across Canada, we started off with Ontario, and then we've moved across the country now. All right, now let's revisit those same documents, starting with the work in progress. Let's go back to Quick View, generate the work in progress for today. And I'm sure as you anticipated, there is no work in progress because you just completed that cycle by converting time into money. Okay? But there was that one report, the revenue report. Now let's look at that. Let's go back into my calendar. Click on action, and I'm going to say revenue by employee for today. How much of revenue did I make? Of course, if you're a solo practitioner, the word employee, of course, is misleading, so pardon that English, but let me generate that document one more time. Just making sure that we've actually entered the payment in. Okay. Let me generate it another way. It's the same report. And there you go. So you have the $600, of course, because the taxes are not calculated. That's the revenue that you made for today. I'm going to go into calendar one more time. And try this out. And there you go. All right, so finally, this report divides the actual revenue generated across individuals in the company. It clearly shows you that Roger Moore, who's the main service provider for this firm for this month, has estimated close to 6.5 hours of effort, but has billed 7.5 hours, resulting in a revenue of $6,700 for the month. Okay. So time, then we generate the invoice, generate the revenue report, and now you can clearly see the amount of revenue generated Now let's add to this mix. Okay, so, but before I go there, maybe let's assume that Roger Moore would draw for the month of August, let's say $3,000 as a withdrawal or to draw from the business. And this is the final step to make your money. Now, how much of money should be withdrawn? Of course, that's based on your financial setup. But when you do that, it is important that you report back into your bookkeeping system that you have done it, and there's a certain way of doing that within the uLaw product. So going to accounts, clicking on action, capital, drawings, transfer is the magic button, and you can choose the date. And here's where you have all the list of your employees, co-workers, colleagues, however you like to name them, listed. So let's say pay for, or say draw for the month August. And as I said, let's agree upon $3,000 paid through a check, or this could be direct deposit, whatever it may be. Okay, you can print that check. So that's done. Now, if you wanted to quickly reflect how much of money has been drawn and how much of draw has been contributed across all your employees, we have a report for that as well. Under document generation, other, called report on drawings. Let's say I do it for the month of August. Clearly shows you that Roger Moore, as of August 21st, has drawn close to $17,000 again. That's a crazy number, but it's basically a playground account. So there you go. It includes the drawings that we just did for $3,000 on August 21st, leading to a running total, of course. That's the total amount drawn to date from the firm. I mean, it's not too bad. Now, if you have multiple individuals contributing to the business and they're drawing for the month, you can clearly see one of my other demos that showcased how you could draw against Mr. Shah Rukh Khan. About 2,260 was the draw for the month of August. Okay? That pretty much gives you a full cycle of how a solo practitioner dockets his or her time, generates the right timesheets, the work in progress report, makes sure that they're on top of their billing, making sure they're invoicing on time, collecting the revenue. So one is important to generate the invoice, but the next very important thing is to be able to follow up with your clients on a timely basis to ensure that you collect the revenue, reflect that into the uLaw system or your any bookkeeping system for that matter. That then translates into revenue made for that particular time period by your business. And then depending on your situation and your setup as a solo practitioner, if you are drawing money from the business, from your legal business into your personal funds, then it's important that you reflect that as well, because that gets reflected in your profit and loss statement, because it's an expense to the business to pay you, the individual, though it may be your own business. That needs to be reflected in the P&L, and that gets reflected in how much of taxes, corporation taxes, that you pay for the end of the year. Okay, so every touch point is important. Now let's focus on maybe the next component, which is if you are a multi-law firm. And if you, again, you don't have to be this large law firm when you call it multi-law firm. This could just be you and your assistant, could be yourself, your assistant, and let's say another co-worker, as long as they're docketing their time and effort, okay, and contributing to the revenue of the business. Okay, that's what's important. So we're going to show you now how you could integrate or include others in the business and capture the same time revenue draw. Okay. If I were to take that same matter, that's a matter that's not yet closed, so let's just continue along this. By default, as I mentioned earlier, if it's a solo practitioner account, it's just your docket. But let's say you have another assistant. And often I take the example of Magneto, one of my favorite X-Men characters. Let's go with that. If I look at my contacts, I know that under co-workers, I do have that name already listed out. Got Magneto Fassbender. All right. Now, either Magneto logs in with his own login, and he's going to see this, but the first step in uLaw is to include Magneto with the type of role that he's going to be playing and the per hour rate that he's going to be charging for this particular matter. So let's say this is Magneto is lawyer 2 or paralegal 2, a legal professional, second in line, or a co-worker. You've just included him as the L2 at this particular rate. And all you have to do when you dock it is essentially tell us the person who's docketing this is L2 himself. So let's say document drafting, court documents, okay. And now when I charge, let's say, I can even type it in, so I'll just say 100, that's an hour. And let's just say I spent an hour as well. And I'll click save. Okay. So now you have 1 hour, okay, at the $300 rate. And that's why the projected balance is at $339, $300 plus tax. If I generate, again, pardon me because I'm going through the whole thing again, but this is so you can appreciate. So the same document that we generated for a sole practitioner automatically reflects the data across individuals. Okay, so now you have for Magneto the 1 hour that was spent at $238 for document drafting compared to the 2 dockets that we had for Roger Moore earlier today. Make sense? I guess it probably does. It gives you a nice summary as well. It tells you, as of today, Roger Moore spent 2 hours, billing an hour and a half. Magneto, 1 hour, 1 hour. And again, I'm not going to repeat myself. Same thing applies to the work in progress, right? So again, it's exactly what you should expect. If I were to do a quick whip report for today, you're going to have the 339 for Mrs. Kapil Sharma. Again, you have the 1 hour unbilled, so you go ahead and generate the invoice. Now, when you do generate the invoice, we have the capability in our settings for you to clearly articulate who within the business participated in the docket. Okay, so you could have Roger Moore, Magneto, Henry, Stefan, all these different co-workers all participating in that same file, to be quite honest. And if that is the case, uLaw allows you to clearly indicate who the individual was and what is their role within that firm. So this clearly tells you Magneto Fassbender, who's an assistant, charging you at $300, costing you the $339, and it's also a running bill, so clearly articulates thank you so much for the client payment that you made through your credit card for $678. As of today, the total that you've spent with us or will be spending with us is 2017, out of which there's an amount of $339 owing, and you've already paid for $678. Okay? Also tells you the taxes on this fees, really clearly articulates all of that information. And it's the same drill. You go ahead, click on this, or maybe you give them a call and accept that payment. And you can do that through the same credit card integration. You don't have to go outside the system at all. So with our integrations, both online through the email link or the link in the PDF, as well as if you're pretty much calling them, for lack of a better term, you could pretty much use this as a terminal. Because right now, you can capture that information. And the importance of this is that right away we tell you whether their funds were approved or not, so that if that credit card did fail, then you can right away ask for the client for another credit card. Okay. And give them a receipt, hit apply. Now let's say I go ahead and generate that report. Revenue by employee. Pretty much run to the summary of this. Clearly shows you that you have Roger Moore. Originally was at 6950. Now you have another provider who's the Magneto, who just generated $300 worth of revenue. Okay? And you do the same thing. You'd go in, draw, instead of choosing Roger Moore, you'd choose Magneto Fassbender, and pretty much do the same drill. And you have, of course, a report that reflects that as well. So this continues on a regular basis. As I said, you can go in here and just say Magneto Fassbender. Okay? Pretty much done. So you're capturing the financial transactions between accounts and individuals and employees as and when it happens, utilizing the reports that give you the information about how much of that dollar that needs to be spent or drawn against each of those individuals. If I go in and do my report on drawings for this month, originally we had 2 individuals. I think it was Mr. Shahrukh and Roger. Now you have 3. Okay. Till date, Magneto has drawn 600. Till date, Roger 17 grand. That remains to be the same. And you can clearly see, as of 21st August, here's that $300. Okay. That's pretty much the crux of today's webinar. Is really to highlight how do you convert time into money in uLaw? How do you convert the time spent? And this applies to flat rate. This applies to how much of our time and effort spent. Because instead of the 1 hour converting into $400, it probably is going to be a direct dollar rate that needs to be paid, but that's the amount of revenue generated. Okay? Keep in mind, of course, this could be happening across multiple matters. You could have another client, you could have your colleagues working on different matters. Just for simplicity and for purposes of the demo, I pretty much chose the same matter. But in the real life, what makes it interesting is this is going to be spawned over multiple matters at various different times in a particular time period. And with that, I'll probably pause if you have any questions specific to today's webinar. I did have this client revenue summary that I wanted to show you. Let's say for the month of August. It gives you a very nice report on which clients have contributed to your firm's revenue. You can see there's Kapil Sharma's about 900, Jackie Shroff about 1,600. You've got Kindle. That's pretty much the split. Okay. And keep in mind that was the 600 plus 900, 300 in terms of just the revenue. The remaining 117 was the taxes. And that's captured too. So pretty much you can do your taxes right here. And you know how much of money has been spent on taxes, how much of money has been received as taxes. Right, so here are all the HST paid, stamp and all of the work. Here's the HST received, including the two legal fees for Kapil Sharma, 78 and 39. Okay, adding up to that 117. I'll be happy to open the floors for any questions that you may have with regards to today's webinar. I know we have another 10 minutes remaining in our webinar today. We definitely would love to make this a little bit more interactive. And please feel free to use the chat window to ask any questions that you may have. Okay, if there aren't any further questions, well, I thank you very much for your time today. I know it was pretty much a sweet and short webinar, especially because it's a non-CPD. I have the opportunity to let you go easy and faster and enjoy the remainder of the afternoon. Please do visit back next week at 2 p.m. for our CPD session, and we look forward to seeing you then. Have yourself a fantastic weekend ahead, and thank you so much.